Ladies and gentlemen, would you mind to come back, sit, and listen? Uh-huh. Can you just converge? Start a convergent process. Yeah, but it's better if I just say, suck. I would like first, before giving the floor to our friend and colleague Reza Ziaran from the CTBTO, will in turn give the floor to our other friend, Lassina Zerbo, which is the Executive Secretary of the CTBTO, and we are very happy to have both of them and everybody else here. I would like to say that Pugwash has been very much a sound defender of the CTBTO. We are looking forward to a moment where the CTBTO will enter in function, and I think that this will be maybe a long time, since there are some critical countries that are still missing. And we try to remind all our friends coming from these critical countries to do something in the direction of pushing the CTBT to enter into function. And the countries missing, for your information, are the United States, China, Pakistan, India, Israel, North Korea, Egypt, and Iran. They're all our friends. I mean, we know all of them. North Korea a little bit less, but that's okay. We know everybody, and we would like to tell our friends sitting there. We have many Iranians here. We have Americans. We have Russians, of course. Please. Russia is perfect. They sign and ratify the CTBT. So they are the good guys, okay? Okay, I hope that now we can go to serious business, and it's a pleasure for me to introduce our colleague, council member of Pugwash, Reza Ziaran, and most importantly is working for the CTBTO, the Comprehensive Test Ban Organization.
Okay. Yeah. You don't need to applaud for me because the speaker is somebody else. Today, Paolo was mentioning that I have the honor of working at CTBTO, a fantastic organization, I would tell you. But today, Paolo, if you allow me, today I want to speak in my personal capacity, as you mentioned, as a Pugwash Council member. It's a pleasure to introduce Dr. Lassina Zerbo, Executive Secretary of the CTBTO. This is both an easy and difficult task for me. It's easy because so many people know Dr. Zerbo. He's a very well-known figure in international field of nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. He's a scientist, as sometimes he himself says, he's a scientist turned into a diplomat, while some diplomats turn into becoming scientists. We have to see which one is better. And I leave it to him to share with you his own experience. He holds a PhD in geophysics and enjoys 25 years of professional career in scientific, technical, managerial and diplomatic fields. Before joining the CTBT in 2004, Dr. Zerbo worked as a senior manager in a number of multinational mining companies. In 2013, recognizing his qualifications and services to the CTBTO, the 183 members of the organization elected him by unanimously elected him as the executive secretary of the organization. Since then, Dr. Zerbo has succeeded in promoting the treaty and raising the profile of the organization. In 2013, he was awarded the Arms Association Arms Control Person of the Year. In 2015, he was awarded the Order of Burkina Faso, the highest national order in Burkina Faso. In 2016, he received the Chilean Order of Grand Cross, and in 2017, every year almost he has gotten something. 2017, he was given the honorary citizenship of the city of Hiroshima in August recently. He's very passionate about his work. I have that first-hand experience, and strongly, what is important is that he strongly believes in the role of youth in securing a better future for mankind. So we have young Pugwash here, and then they should be very pleased with that. Oh, by the way, I should not forget that he is a gender champion as well. It is difficult to list all the achievements of Dr. Zerbo. This would require me standing here and talking for several hours today. And I don't believe that you want me to stay here and talk to you for that long. With this introduction and without any further ado, on behalf of Pugwash, I welcome Dr. Zerbo and invite him to address the conference. Dr. Zerbo.
Thank you, Ambassador Ziaran. Mr. Chairman, Kasim Jomar Tokayev, Mr. Secretary General Paulo Couto Ramusino, thank you for inviting me to address this important conference. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by saying that Reza is talking about success. I would have said success if the treaty was in force today. I've spent 4 years trying to promote it, but I think there's still a long way to go, as mentioned by Paulo. But it is a pleasure to speak at this International Pugwash Conference. Pugwash has been an invaluable advocate for true human and global security since its first meeting in Nova Scotia in 1957. A number of challenges face the international community today. This makes the need for dialogue and discussion between practitioners, academic communities, and international organizations more critical than ever before. The opening talks have laid out my groundwork anyway with regard to the promotion of the CTBT or the role that the CTBT can play in non-proliferation and disarmament. But I'm particularly happy to be speaking here because Pugwash has one foot in science and the other in global affairs. As Executive Secretary of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, its Preparatory Commission, This science and policy nexus is exactly what I have devoted myself to. It feels really enlivening to be around people who share the goal of making the world safer through science and international cooperation. The theme of this conference is confronting new nuclear danger. In the next days, we are to consider it from regional and global perspective. I have the experience confronting one particular type of nuclear danger, the danger posed by nuclear weapon testing. It has had a dangerous and destabilizing impact on global security and terrible effects on human health and environment. Paulo has mentioned the correlation between conflict and nuclear risk. Let's not forget that nuclear testing is part of that. Thankfully, nuclear weapons have not been used for their intended purpose since those two terrible cases in 1945. But the absence of wartime use does not mean the absence of victims. And that leads me to the lesson learned from Kazakhstan's experience of nuclear testing. Kazakhstan is a vivid example of the risk posed by nuclear explosion tests. On 29 August 1949, at the Semipalatinsk test site, the Soviet Union detonated its first explosive device. Over the next 40 years, nearly 500 nuclear explosive tests were conducted at the Semipalatinsk test site, with devastating consequences for hundreds of thousands of people who lived in the region and for their environment. Though birth defects and leukemia are no longer so commonplace, other effects have lingered, such as an overall decrease in life expectancy. Some areas are still too dangerous to enter or to go near. This experience has given Kazakhstan an added sense of purpose and responsibility, pushing for a total ban on nuclear tests. On 29 August 1991, President Nursultan Nazarbayev permanently closed the Semipalatinsk nuclear test site. Leading by example, Kazakhstan also voluntarily renounced to the fourth largest nuclear arsenal in the world. Kazakhstan leadership, from its experience, has laid the groundwork for the CTBT role in promoting a nuclear test-free world. I recently met Foreign Minister Kono from Japan. He said to me, non-proliferation and disarmament are flowing in his blood. I think the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty flows in Kazakhstan's blood. In his manifesto, President Nazarbayev rightly points out that the effects of nuclear weapon and nuclear weapon testing cannot be contained in either time or space. They are a global issue which requires global cooperation. 4 days from now, on the very same 29 August, we will mark the International Day Against Nuclear Tests. Indeed, the CTBTO works hard every day to make sure that every day is a day against nuclear tests. As we work to consign nuclear testing to history, we must not forget the importance of trust at the regional and international levels. It takes time to build trust and much more to rebuild it. But once it's there, many things become possible. With uncertainties clouding the international political area, it may seem difficult to agree on much, but we can still agree that the world does not need more nuclear weapons or more nuclear testing. We all want a world free of nuclear weapons. While there are different views on how to reach that goal, we must remind ourselves that we do not yet have even a nuclear test-free world. And that reminds me of a story in my part of the world in Africa. We all have experience dealing with kids, with babies. Babies, they come out, they lay down in the bed, they sit, and then they crawl before they walk, and then they start running. But I'm sure you've seen babies who jump crawling and then go walking and running. In Africa, when a baby does this, they force him to crawl for some time because they say if you don't crawl and you start walking immediately after sitting, you will not have solid legs. So that's basically what I see in nuclear disarmament. There were measures like the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and many other international measures that were laid out that are not finished yet. So let's make sure we get those so that we prepare the solid ground for the solid leg that can be nuclear disarmament. And then we'll have something that is solid enough for eternal peace and security. And this is why, when we talk about the nuclear weapon ban treaty, the weapon ban treaty, and many people have asked me, how is this new treaty affecting the CTBT? It's a question that I refuse to answer. Because anything that goes towards that goal that we all share, which is having a world free from the threat and free from nuclear weapon, it's something that we adhere to. But of course, as Executive Secretary of the CTBT, I preach my own chapel. I want to clean my doorstep first. And that's why I'm asking all of you to go along with that little anecdote I shared with you from Africa. That is, if you are a baby, try to crawl before you start walking, and then you'll have solid legs. So, the CTBT is within reach, and that's why when a baby sits and then he wants to crawl, crawling is easy, because he can crawl immediately before he starts work. So let's make sure we grab what is within our reach. And it is achievable if there is a strong political will and preference for multilateralism and collective security. We cannot be ignoring the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty when we talk about non-proliferation and disarmament. And as I said, nobody will lead me to say or to feel or to be shy to talk about the CTBT, like as we call in French, une maladie honteuse. The CTBT exists. The CTBT was meant to enter into force. We have to make sure it does, because it will create the solid ground that we need for eternal peace and security. The CTBT should serve as a common denominator and a solid basis for continuing dialogue and expanding cooperation. This should especially be considered in light of the current tension in the Korean Peninsula. Putting at least a testing moratorium up front in the discussion with the DPRK would be a positive development. And I mean it. I'm sometimes shocked to hear talking about resolving the DPRK issue, and then nobody mentioned the importance of the entry into force of the CTBT. If the DPRK is testing, it's because the CTBT is not in force yet. With the CTBT in force, there's no room for testing. The CTBTO is doing important work by giving states confidence that the global moratorium against nuclear testing is being upheld, and that no nuclear test or explosion will go undetected. The international monitoring system can credibly verify compliance with the ban on nuclear testing. The international monitoring system is a global network of monitoring facilities that make it impossible to conduct a nuclear test without the international community knowing it. Together, the 290 monitoring facilities of the international monitoring system form a global radar system that covers every part of the planet. This system is supported by the International Data Center, the IDC in Vienna, which processes and analyzes data non-stop. Our international monitoring system is currently at 92% complete, yet it has already exceeded expectation in terms of coverage and detection capabilities. The readiness and speed within which 97 seismic stations detected the 2016 DPRK nuclear test demonstrated the effectiveness of the verification system. It also highlighted the democratic nature of the data collection which enable the international community to be provided with impartial evidence. Today, we can say with confidence that even if a country conducting a nuclear test does not announce it, the international monitoring system and the international data center would ensure that the international community will get reliable, objective, and verifiable data about the situation on the ground. In addition to its verification purpose, our data is useful for many civil and scientific purposes, including tsunami prediction and monitoring the effect of climate change. This data is shared with all state signatories. It is also made available to organizations and academics in member states. The IMS and the IDC represent a real achievement for science and diplomacy in making the world a better place. It is a representation of what we can achieve when we work together as the international community rather than individual states. Now, what's the way forward for the CTBT? The way forward is first to never think that the CTBT is separable from this international monitoring system. The noise that we hear, that the IMS is great, the IMS is good, but the treaty is yet to be thought of. This is impossible. The international monitoring system were made to support the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. At the organizational setting that we have in Vienna, no one will work towards thinking that those two are separable. If we try, we'll destroy the basis of this treaty, which is its verification regime. The CTBT has a unique position in the history of treaties. It is nearly universally adhered to, but not yet technically in force. And when I say not yet technically in force, I received the credential of an ambassador a couple of days ago who mentioned that, since the organization is not official yet, we have a problem. And I said, what do you mean the organization is not official? The organization is official. That's why you're presenting your credential. If it wasn't, you wouldn't be presenting your credential to a commission. Even if it's a preparatory commission, the preparatory commission of the CTBTO was set for as an international organization. And that's something that we forget. And this is what probably makes the CTBT so distant from the reality and then from the discussion in non-proliferation and disarmament on any talk in the Korean Peninsula or somewhere else. And that's something, and that's food for thought. There are also many aspects of the treaty which only become valid after the treaty has entered in force. First of all, its ability to conduct an on-site inspection, similar to the unprecedented on-site field exercise held by the CTBTO in Semi-Palatines in 2008 and in Jordan in 2014. To finish what we started, we still need the ratification of the treaty by 8 remaining countries mentioned by Paolo Ramusino. And these are China, the United States, Egypt, Iran, Israel, that have yet to ratify the treaty, and India, Pakistan, and North Korea that have to even sign it. Many of these states take the position that they will not ratify the treaty unless other Annex II states does so. The problem arises when states on both sides say the same thing. Someone always has to show leadership. And I think organizational setting like Pugwash could and should, and they are. You've been doing a great work in promoting peace and security, in promoting the push for the entry into force of the CTBT, and that's why I'm so pleased to be here, because you're giving us an opportunity to remain relevant and an opportunity for people to not forget this treaty that is part of the international framework towards non-proliferation and disarmament. In Vienna, we are working closely with 183 members to reach the finish line. Every 2 years, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty state signatories meet for what we call the Article 14 Conference to advance the treaty's entry into force. The last conference, which was presided over by Kazakhstan and Japan, was held in 2015. The next is to be held by Belgium and Iraq will take place on September 20th, 2017 in New York. During the following 2 years, the co-presidents will employ a targeted approach to reach out to key decision makers in the 8 remaining Annex II states. While such direct engagement with the mentioned 8 states will continue, there is also a central role the academic community, civil society, and youth can play in supporting the entry into force of the treaty. I say youth because we all now getting familiar with Twitter feed. Yesterday I saw a tweet that was sent with my Twitter handle with a 1-year-old baby. Is our youngest CTBTO youth group member. And he was asked by his dad, but he can't talk, but I guess he understands. Do you want to grow in the world with nuclear weapon? He threw him that wonderful smile, and he said no. And he gave a kiss to his dad. So that's the image that I have as I remain attached to the entry into force of this treaty and attached to the youth, as mentioned by Reza. We have to get youth to refuse the current order. Youth are the ones who will probably live a world without nuclear weapon. They want to prepare it now. And this young boy doesn't want to grow up in a world with the threat of nuclear weapon. So we should work for him, as he said that he will not let us down. I was teasing his dad that I hope he will one day be not the executive secretary, but the director general of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization. So in conclusion, let me say that no speech to the Pugwash Conference would be complete without a mention of that immortal line from the Russell-Einstein Manifesto: remember your humanity and forget the rest. And I want to close by considering what it really means, why sometimes living up to it can be so difficult, and what happens when we don't. Pugwash brings together science and global politics, 2 fields which can seem at times to be quite cold and headless. But they only seem like this when we forget that the true purpose of science and politics is to the benefit of humanity, your humanity. We need to ensure that the well-being of people will not be sacrificed for false notions of power and prestige in a zero-sum game. The result is suffering, like that many people around the semi-Palantis test site. The fear of a mother helping or hoping a baby will be spared, the birth defects she has seen happening all around her. The fear of those wondering if their loved one with cancer will survive. This suffering is not old news. It continues to this day. It is our duty at these conferences to not only search for ways to ease this suffering, but to simply remember it and hold it in our minds. It reminds us of our humanity and reminds us of what would happen what would happen if we forget it and allow once again an outbreak of nuclear testing. Paulo, I thank you, and I look forward to our exchange of ideas. Thank you so much. So, if Paulo, I have in appreciation for all the work you do for the CTBT and for what Pugwash is doing, I wanted to hand over this coin, which is 20 years of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, and a special copy of the treaty to Pugwash.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We thank you very much, Dr. Zerbo, for his inspiring speech, for his commitment to a very difficult task, which is to make this treaty enter into force. I'm wondering if there is any question, comment, or... Okay, yes, please. Can we have a... Yes.
Does it work? Yes. Okay. One question. I'm Carlo Trezza from
It doesn't
from
work
Italy.
properly.
The only country actually testing is the DPRK. What possibilities does the CTBTO have to approach the DPRK and dissuade them from testing? Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for the, it's a question that comes often to us. Have you visited the DPRK? My answer has always been, so if I have a return ticket, yes, I'm ready to go. But it has always been difficult to approach or to have an opportunity to exchange with officials from the country. But I've had an opportunity to sit, thanks to the UN, the luncheon that they organized for head of delegation, to sit with the foreign minister of North Korea. At the time, that was 2 years ago. And an opportunity to exchange few words. The second opportunity that I had was at the conference in Russia, where you have officials from this region coming. My personal experience is that they have their own logic. I think alone it would be difficult for me to change anything. The only thing that I could do is to talk about what we do, and that we, as an international organization and a verification mechanism for a treaty, we dare to be the deterrent for any country to think that they can conduct a nuclear test explosion without being detected. But to your question, what I'm tempted to say is that it would help if any discussion regarding this Korean peninsula and the DPRK itself would include a notion of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, which is not the case at this point in time. We hear and then we see many debates, sometimes to a point when people talk about stopping or denuclearizing the Korean peninsula. They talk about ballistic missile and then they forget that they've done 5 tests. They were doing a test every 3 years, but in 2016 they did 2 in 1 year. That's an indication that we shouldn't think that they are powerless. That's what I can say. But I'm open for any opportunity that will include the CTBT and then provide an opportunity for us to talk about the verification regime that we're building and the work that the international community has allowed the treaty and the organization to achieve for the past 20 years plus.
May I add some comments? First of all, I would like to say that I'm so happy, Mr. Trezza, to see you here in Astana. You're a well-known expert on disarmament issues. You were ambassador of Italy for so many years to the conference on disarmament. As far as DPRK is concerned, I think that talking about its adjoining to the CTBT must be acknowledged as a dream now, taking into account the current situation around the Korean Peninsula. But at the same time, we should not lose our hopes. And first of all, in this regard, I would like to mention that all the countries involved, all the powers involved, must exercise restraint on this particular moment. Because, as I said in my keynote speech, the whole situation seems to be quite dangerous. So I think that DPRK must be regarded still as a partner to talk with. And as my distinguished colleague, Mr. Zerbo, said, we must be tolerant, must give up a bellicose rhetoric, and should come together to sit at the round tables with the DPRK delegations as well as its representatives to talk about nuclear disarmament. We must be absolutely persistent, because as far as you know, diplomacy is about patience. we must be patient on this particular and very much responsible moment. Thank you very much.
Is any, sure. No, okay.
Shall I go ahead?
Sure, but I was, okay, it's fine, fine. There's room for everybody.
My name is Bruce Blair from Princeton and Global Zero. The new ban treaty prohibits testing of nuclear weapons. Is it your understanding that there are no definitions in the treaty? Is it your understanding that testing means the same under that treaty as it does under the CTBT? Or is there some question about the interpretation of that word in the treaty? I know Egypt, for example, is saying that it prohibits subcritical testing and even some testing of some security and safety features of nuclear weapons. So is there a consensus and understanding on what that means?
You're asking a difficult question, but you know, the High Representative of Disarmament, who was part of the discussion, would probably be a better person to answer this question. But nevertheless, let me, the notion of subcritical tests and you know, modeling and modernizing has been a topic that came to our board discussion as well in Vienna. But if it is considered that the CTBT is as it is for explosive testing, I mean, it's mean that maybe there was something that was missing in the negotiation that would include what we call subcritical test or modernization, because that's not part of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. So now, how this can be part of the Weapon Ban Treaty, that's something that I've not been you know, closely part of, and that other people could talk about. But the CTBT as it is refers to explosive testing and not modeling or simulation and so forth. But I'm not saying that I'm for simulation. I'm just saying that the treaty that we are fighting for its entry into force and the verification mechanism that we're putting in place doesn't include that notion. And that's something that should be said, that we tend to forget when we bring it in the discussion at the CTBT in Vienna. That's, I mean, we have no verification mechanism for simulation. That's not a verification mechanism that we're building. And that's something that should be said.
Thank you. Tarek Rauf, Pugwash, Canada. Dr. Zerbo, in your speech today, you mentioned CTBT, the Youth Forum. And I was wondering whether you had considered inviting some young persons from North Korea, whether they might be young diplomats or young academics from some university there, to take part in one of the events of the CTBT Youth Forum. And a related question is, you also established the group of eminent persons, and some of them are here in this room today. And I was wondering, what is your message to them to redouble their efforts to help you bring this treaty into force? Thank you.
Thank you, Tarek. Talking about youth, during the 20 years anniversary of the treaty in Vienna, our ambition was to bring youth from the 8 remaining Annex II countries. We succeeded in having youth from the 7, except the DPRK. In fact, we had a candidate from DPRK to join, but I mean, one of the conditions was that, you know, we shouldn't have him in any of the picture. With social media and smartphone today, you cannot bring anyone in a meeting and then guarantee that somebody will not hide his camera or his phone and then take a picture. So I think that led into not securing his presence. But I think we did well in having a representative from you know, countries like India and Pakistan, because my interaction with youth from those countries tells me that they have a different mindset with regard not only to the CTBT, but to non-proliferation and disarmament as a whole. And in fact, people will be surprised to see that the CTBT youth group has probably more Indian and Pakistan than any other nationality, for a reason that I don't know, but a reason that is good, probably, and that's why they are member of the CTBT youth group. So even if there is no direct dialogue with some of the country, and even if I appreciate Pakistan's observership to the CTBT as a first step towards any other engagement that we might have with them, I think the youth from those countries are doing their utmost to do the educational groundwork that is needed to probably come to a point, and the fact that we are in a different generation today than the time where the treaty was negotiated, and probably that the pressure of other international measures command that we do something for the entry into force of the CTBT, and that's what we're trying to do with youth group members. You refer to the GEM, and I want to thank Pugwash for having many of its members that are members of the CTBT group of eminent persons. Together with me on this podium is Ambassador Ziaran Danapala. I think they've been sparing no effort in promoting and including the CTBT in the bilateral or international discussion or international setting where they are invited. You've heard today during the opening remark that many of them refer to the CTBT and then put it well where it should be. And the High Representative was talking about her predecessor. I think 3 of her predecessors are members of the CTBT group of eminent persons, including Angela Kane, who wasn't in the podium. But Sergio Duarte, Angela Kane, and Ziaran Danapala are all members of the CTBT group of eminent persons. I thank them for accepting this responsibility, because we count on them to use their experience and how they can reach out probably further than we can do in Vienna to help push the entry into force of this treaty. My ambition today, and the ambition of the organization, is to bridge that gap between the youth and the group, members of the group of eminent persons, those who have known the negotiation for this treaty and those who will enjoy one day a world free of nuclear weapons. To get those two together so that they can talk, and then they can share the knowledge from the negotiation, and the youth group can talk about their perspective and how they see the world in the years to come.
Thank you, Alan Ware from Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament. And I commend you, Mr. Zerbo, and the Preparatory Commission for the CTBTO for its work in promoting the CTBT, and also for the international monitoring system. One of the things we've seen from the international monitoring system is it's got additional benefits to detecting nuclear tests. The seismic system is linked into the tsunami early warning system, so now we have immediate real-time information about if a tsunami is coming. And also the radionuclide system is now available and has been used, for example, after Fukushima, in detecting sort of, where radionuclides and accidents are. So I was wondering if in encouraging those states and in moving those states which haven't yet ratified the CTBT, it's useful to highlight those additional security benefits of the CTB, such as tsunami early warning system, radionuclide monitoring, but also how that contributes to global security and disarmament beyond just the detecting of nuclear tests, because it really is a benefit for humanity as a whole, even beyond the detecting of nuclear tests. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I'll take 2 questions before.
Hello, my name is Farouk Azam from Afghanistan. I'm a peace activist. The question is how trust is built. Pakistan is a nuclear power because of India. India because of China. China because of Russia in the Mao Zedong time, and Russia because of the United States. How trust can be built? How this chain of mistrust can be broken? Thank you.
I say, if you don't mind, I'll answer those two questions because my brain is getting slow as I just landed this morning. So thank you. The additional benefits of the CTBT and its IMS, as a port d'entrée towards countries that have not signed and or ratified the CTBT. I'll use the example of Cuba, although not an Annex II country. I was invited at the Science and Technology Conference in Cuba they wanted to know what benefits the technology that we use for nuclear test monitoring can help for civil and scientific application. So that has been an open door to discuss with the official in Cuba and then see why they would not join the CTBT. Is there any political reason that we're not aware of, or political reason that they can talk about? I think this has been helpful for Cuba, and this is helpful for the developing countries. I can tell you that wherever I go in the developing world, what people want to see is, look, nuclear test monitoring is not our priority. What are you offering? So, and this is what has led us to build capacity in the civil and scientific application of the technology that we're using. But it has its downside too, because let's face it, the prime mandate of the treaty and the verification is for nuclear test monitoring. We don't want to create a situation where people forget what we haven't finished, which is getting this treaty into force, because the promotion of its civil and scientific benefits is getting bigger and bigger. So we have to strike that balance between what people might need from the developing world and what we still need from those countries who have not ratified the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty for its entry into force. But we're trying to strike that balance. And Fukushima was a good example to show what we can offer in a country that is Japan, that is a strong, strong, strong supporter of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament. But we're taking this direction with many of the countries, including, in fact, our discussion with some of the scientists in India and Pakistan. Because when I say that India and Pakistan have not ratified, we have our series of science and technology conferences where experts from those countries participate, because you don't have to be a member of the treaty to join the science and technology series of conference that we have in Vienna, because that's an formal or informal exchange of scientists to discuss ways of improving the technology that we use and then go beyond. And then we enjoy participation from non-ratifying state and not signatory state as well. The second question was on trust. And then I think you put it well by saying one country is nuclear because of others and nuclear because of others and then so forth, and then you took them two by two. Fortunately, or let's say unfortunately, that's probably the same rhetoric that the leader in North Korea is using today. Because he wrote and he said that he doesn't want to live the experience of Libya. He doesn't want to live the experience of Iraq. That's what he says, not what I'm saying. So it's basically, he's putting himself in the situation where his insecurity forces him to put that as a deterrent. But you would be surprised when I visited some of, and I won't name any, the countries that are already or today nuclear power country, and then I look at the history of the nuclear weapon process, the process that led them to build nuclear weapon. And you listen to scientists in the early 50s, it's the same rhetoric that they say by building and then trying to secure nuclear weapons. So how do we deal with this? We have to probably make the leader in North Korea understands that its security doesn't go necessarily by developing nuclear weapon, that's not the way he can save his regime. And Dr. Zig Heike from Stanford puts it well, same as Bill Perry, that he should know that any attempt to use nuclear weapon from his side will lead to a complete destruction of his country, including his regime. So if the reason for him to try to develop nuclear weapon is to save his regime, he's doing the opposite. I think somehow we have to come to play where we give him the assurance that that's not what the international community wants, that nobody wants his regime to fall. What we want is him to be part of the international community and the framework and the international measure that we put forward. And this is why Chairman Tokayev and many of the speakers this morning have talked about dialogue. We've talked about dialogue. I think the diplomat that many of you know better than I do, that it's through dialogue that we can achieve a lot, and that what has happened recently in many places in the world show that we're not gaining anything in going for war today. And I'm not saying it myself, but even people from those countries who are talking over this issue are giving the same rhetoric. So that's all what I can offer in
May I add a couple of comments to the question of the peace activists from Afghanistan? He made the point right to the he made a question, put the question right to the point, saying that it's a matter of trust. Currently, major problem in the international situation, as we can see, is the lack of mutual confidence and trust. And Mr. Zerbo also mentioned that whenever we speak about nuclear arsenals or the putting in effect the CTBT, we need to face, or we have to face the problem of the lack of confidence. This is a major problem. Another problem is a huge ambiguity around the nuclear armaments. The peace activist from Afghanistan was absolutely right saying that, okay, the new nuclear arsenals or nuclear weapons in Pakistan are being based on the understanding that there are the same nuclear arsenals in India, and so on, so on, so on. A lot of ambiguities. Unfortunately, the international community was not able to stop this chain, evil chain of ambiguities around the nuclear armaments. Now we have the problem of the North Korea. Kazakhstan, as a permanent member of the Security Council, voted for the sanctions against North Korea. That was absolutely right, as far as the Security Council is concerned, as well as the position of Kazakhstan on this particular issue. But at the same time, I would like to mention once again that this kind of situation that we are witnessing now is absolutely dangerous. So we need to find out some ways out of the current dangerous situation, not to allow a nuclear conflict which will become, may become a global one to occur. So I think that the Pugwash Conference in this respect also must generate some concrete suggestions with regard to how we may solve and address the problem of North Korea. North Korean stance seems to be unacceptable to the whole international community, but it doesn't mean that we need to find ways of persuading the regime in that country to be more tolerant, as well as to be more patient with regard to the opinion of the whole international community. This is a very dangerous situation. Once again, I must mention. So I think that with the help of the NGOs as well as of the United Nations, first of all, we need to bring this situation to an acceptable solution. And once again, I would like to mention also the role of the youth. As probably you mentioned that there were a lot of young people here in this conference room. We made it deliberately, inviting students as well as students of the colleges to listen to us. And we fully support the initiative of Mr. Zerbo to bring together the eminent persons of the CTBTO as well as the youth. So there should not be a gap between both generations. It's a very good initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm Angela Kane. I'm the former High Representative for Disarmament Affairs and a member of the GEM. And I just wanted to say a couple of words of commendation to Lassina for having created the GEM. And I'm not saying that because I'm a member, but because I've seen the benefit of actually having what one used to call in the UN a group of friends to basically support the effort. So he's not the only one speaking out in favor of the CTBTO, supported by member states, but also by a community of people who have had long experience in these matters. But I also want to mention particularly the youth group, and you, Mr. Tokayev, already spoke about this. And it was created after the GEM, and I remember that we had about 2 years ago, we had a very intensive, last year actually, we had a very intensive exchange between the GEM members and the youth group members. And what I've been impressed with is not only the dedication which they've brought to the task, but also I spoke to them earlier this year in Washington when there was a conference of the Carnegie Corporation, and they had a presentation outside of all of the papers and the work they've done. And they've come up with really innovative solutions with new ideas. And I think that these ideas really should be propagated a bit more. And I wanted to ask you, Lassina, what is being done to bring that to the fore? Because we are looking for not only new ideas, but we're also looking to a new generation that needs to be educated. And you recall, and you mentioned Dr. Perry, that we had a discussion with him earlier this year, because he's dedicated his life now to basically educating a younger generation. And this is what's missing. There is no institutional memory. We need to create that. We need to basically bring up a new generation to learn the intricacies of testing, of non-proliferation. And I feel very strongly that then more efforts need to be made, and that's why the youth group fits into it so well. Thank you.
Selim Sazak from Brown University. Thank you, Dr. Zerbo, for your remarks. Hello. I'm also a member of the CTBT youth group. Your leadership is very inspiring to all of us. Here we are today at a state party to the CTBT, Kazakhstan. Many of us, including your younger colleagues, are from countries that are state parties to the CTBT. For those of us that are not from Annex II countries that are already party to the CTBT, what role is there for us to contribute to entrenching the CTBT as a norm and making sure that our countries are part of this effort for a universal comprehensive test ban treaty? How could we advance these? How could we advance this task in countries that are not necessarily the priority, the main obstacle between us and the full entry into force of the CTBT? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Zerbo, to you and to your distinguished colleagues at the head table. My name is Cesar Jaramillo. I'm the Executive Director of Project Plowshares, based in Canada. You made a reference to the moratorium of the test ban treaty with some notable exceptions that we're all familiar with. My question is there a point at which we can consider a test ban to be part of customary international law, regardless of the status of ratification? Thank you.
My distinguished youth group member, I think Angela is right. The youth group has brought more relevance to the treaty today than we've been doing for so long. And it's true, I did mention the importance of youth group members from the Annex II countries, or countries that have not even signed the treaty. And the drive that they have today in pushing for not simply or only the entry into force of the CTBT, to help educate people around them to understand the importance of the CTBT and how it fits in the global non-proliferation and disarmament framework. I was at Monterrey a couple of weeks ago, and then I had an exchange with members of the CTBT youth group again, and then, I mean, that's how the work is going. But you're right, we need a structure. You've talked about, you and I have talked about it, how to structure this in a way where it's, you know, I would say it's more formal. So, because, I mean, but in another hand, the minute we try to structure, and the diplomat you have will say the CTBT is not part of the treaty, because that's exactly what's happening now. As we work towards having the statement for the Article 14, a consensus statement, Ambassador Reza can tell you that people are wondering if we should make any reference to the youth, saying that the youth wasn't part of the negotiation, it wasn't part of the treaty. So you see, and you know that with diplomat it's always consensus. But I mean, I do get shocked to hear people not wanting to make reference to youth today. Because those who do that probably forget that they used to be young. And since we all want to remain young, it's always good to be with, you know, youth. So that will keep us young. So if we don't make reference to them, that's a difficult thing. That's why that balance between having a formal structure of CTBT youth where they interact regularly with the organization, there's always a difficulty. So we have to go step by step. First of all, we were told we can't get our regular budget to sponsor youth. I mean, it has always been that's something I've learned in diplomacy. They always say no in the beginning until they realize that it's bearing fruit, and then they get used to it, and then we move on. So the youth group today is becoming slowly and strongly part of the CTBT framework, and then we'll try and then take your point, and the point that many have made about the CTBT youth group and youth in general, to make it more formal, and then have it structured in a way where that gap that I talk about bridging between the GEM members and the youth, by the discussion you've had, can continue. And I'm happy to see a CTBT youth group member. Wherever I go and then I meet them now, it makes me feel even younger. So, you know, listening to you now, my brain's become a little bit faster than it was at the beginning of my talk. But you're right. Youth group members from countries that are signatory and ratifying country of the CTBT, I think what you have to do is to basically help those who have the motivation from countries that are not ratifying states to share your experience, and then talk about, and among yourself, about how. And one idea came, which was, why can't we have a ratification of the 8 remaining countries, their youth, to adhere to a youth forum where they ratify the treaty, and then they have the youth CTBT that works. I mean, you see, that's becoming a little bit, you know, getting close to what diplomat would not like to see. And I wanted to do a mock entry into force with the youth in Vienna. It wasn't easy if we had all 8 countries represented. So we could have had a mock, because it's like a theater, you know, like, you know, something that will give a little bit more energy and more enthusiasm to those who believe in this treaty and believe in its role in the overall framework of disarmament. But I take your point, and then, you know, we're exchanging. Because of you guys, I'm on Twitter, so which is good too, because I was so scared of social media, but with you guys, I'm forced to doing it, but we'll try and work towards that. And Canada, making the CTBT customary law has been a discussion that came from a few member states and few experts, and mainly lawyers, who believe that for a treaty that was meant to enter into force within 2 or 3 years, 20 years later, if it's not done, we got to find a solution. I mean, it's a solution that is difficult to find, I must admit, because the treaty was probably made that difficult to enter into force, so that the day it enters, it creates that solid ground that I was talking about in that process towards a full disarmament and non-proliferation. This is how I see it. Sometime, one member of the group of eminent person was the one who brought that Annex 2 framework into the treaty negotiation. Whenever I see him, whenever we talk, I say, I feel like locking you in a room and then tell you to find another solution to get out of it. So, but I guess the Annex 2 was made to make it more complicated, but to ensure that if we do manage to get it into force, we'll have one of the strongest international multilateral agreement in history.
Thank you. Last round of quick, I see two, and then, yes, Jim, yes. The microphone?
I have a microphone here.
No, sorry.
Yeah.
It's,
if I can go ahead.
No, it's here. I mean, it's not.
I've been raising my hand for the last half an hour, sir. It's a humble request if you could please take my question. I'm also a member of youth group of the CTBTO. I recently joined. Dr. Zerbo, I'm Orko Biswas from India. I recently joined the youth group of CTBTO, and I would be honest, as I was in my application as well, that I am curious to know what India's evolving position is. And it should change on India's evolving position on whether it should sign or not the CTBT. But my question is on DPRK. North Korea has already conducted several tests, and what if it conducts few more tests in the coming years, and then decides that it need not conduct further tests and joins CTBT without giving up nuclear weapons? Would that be acceptable, or would that be acceptable to the international community or not?
Thank you. Can you just handle the, okay. Please, give the microphone here.
Thank you. My name is Zalimjan Akhmetov. I'm from Kazakhstan, Center for International Security and Policy. Dr. Zerbo, these 8 remaining countries, let's say 5+3, I wonder, could you share your view, who do you expect to sign and join or ratify the treaty, the closest to the finish line, let's say? And the second question is this new treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. As we know, for example, Iran and Egypt, they were very active on that conference. And do you expect this new treaty will help you to push these countries and to join the treaty, the CTBT? Thank you.
Last question from Azad Durrani, General Azad Durrani. No, ma'am, here.
Yeah, Asad Durrani from Pakistan. So I'm very glad that the youth from my country has been able to impress you. I also know that Pakistan is not likely to test, except under some extreme circumstances. And the treaty provides for those extreme circumstances in which even after signing you can step out. But the reason that they are not going to do are mostly political or psychological, hardly ever technical. Same is the case for FMCP. My question to you is, under these circumstances, must we insist that all of us must keep crawling to sign that ultimate objective that you had before any walking takes place? Is there anything that you have in mind that regardless of these countries not signing, including my own, and I understand their reasons, we can get on with something else?
Thank you. This is the last question, sorry. No more time. Please.
Okay.
Yeah, but. So.
There's one with a microphone.
Okay. Huh?
There's one with a microphone there. Yeah. There's a lady with a microphone there.
Yeah, but there's too many people that are requesting.
Okay.
So we.
Thank you for noticing me. I'm Salma Shaheen from King's College London. I just wanted to share my thought on South Asia, and Mr. Zerbo may like to comment on it. I understand the importance of the CTBT, and I also respect the unilateral moratorium that both India and Pakistan has in place. And, but given these unilateral steps, the downside is that the need to develop the continuous development of the nuclear forces and unsophisticated nuclear forces, but larger in number, in order to meet the nuclear deterrence. So they are continuously developing it. It's not a sophisticated nuclear force, but they have to develop it to meet their nuclear deterrence needs. Thank you.
Okay. No.
Здравствуйте. Всех участников приветствую в конференции.
Sorry.
Добро пожаловать в священную землю казахской земли. Здесь очень в зале присутствует молодежи. И есть и главная проблема в доверии этих стран, больших стран держав. Возможно ли предложить какую-то альтернативу доверия, альтернативу гаранта для этих стран, чтобы решить данный вопрос? Спасибо.
Okay. We don't know. Yes, okay. Now we are done. I think.
The first question from the youth group member was, I think at the end he said, can North Korea do more tests? A situation where North Korea will do more tests and then join the CTBT without giving up its nuclear weapon ambition. I hope we don't reach that level of development, to be honest. And this is why I insist that we make sure the CTBT is part of any discussion with the DPRK for they should stop testing. Early on in my presentation, I talked about moving from doing a test every 3 years to doing 2 tests in 1 year. An indication that they're being master in that technology of developing a nuclear weapon. Zig Heke, I referred to him because he visited DPRK 7 or 8 times. And he said already in 2006 that we should take the DPRK seriously and make sure there's no further test. But at the time, the 2006 test was considered as a failed test, and then people thought that, okay, those guys are not serious enough, and then there's no way they'd be in the position to do more tests and then to develop nuclear weapon. And then 2009, 13, and then 16. So from Zig Heke's talk from 2006 and where we are today, we should be more conscious that it's time to stop testing, not only ballistic, but also nuclear test explosion. I was reading yesterday again that they might go for another one because of the geopolitical condition that they are in right now, this week. So why should we let them do more tests and at the same time refuse that they are a nuclear weapon country? It goes together. The more tests they do, the more they get closer and closer to developing or to acquiring a nuclear weapon. So we should stop them by the means that the diplomats are best at, the means that the international community today knows more, and then those who have bilateral agreement with the DPRK should be part of the discussion framework that will get them to change their mindset with regard to their nuclear weapon ambition. So joining the CTBT, yes, but joining while stopping their nuclear ambition will be better, because if you join the CTBT, I mean, it means already that you have no intention for doing more than what you have. But your point was, we do it, we're sure that we need no tests, no more tests, and then we join the CTBT. That's an idea that in my several talks with students, it has come. People were saying the same thing, that with India and Pakistan's unilateral moratorium, why don't you tell them, okay, you want to do more tests, do it, and then join the CTBT? I mean, I won't and I cannot be an advocate of that theory, because that will be contrary to what I'm paid for. And if I was doing a free job where I have no salary, I could entertain this type of discussion, but I'm paid to make sure the treaty enters into force through a certain process. So that's what I would say with regard to this question. So the second question was about if something new can help the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. I think my answer to this was the little anecdote that I mentioned about Africa, a baby that sits And then few babies do that. Maybe 5% of babies in the world will jump from sitting to walking. And that's the example that I gave. So that in my part of the world, we have to make sure they crawl a little bit so that their knees touch the ground more and then prepare them to be solid. That's what I would say about the CTBT and any other new international measure. And that's why we have that slogan since 2 years ago, let's finish what we started. And the notion of a low-hanging fruit is something that is reachable today and that we should catch, and as a way to help move towards the solid non-proliferation and disarmament framework. I was happy to have flown in yesterday with Ellen White, the chairperson of the Weapon Ban Treaty. And then, we had a long discussion, and then I was telling her, I said, but Ellen, don't you think that the CTBT could be a bridge in that big divide between the nuclear weapon countries and then the proponent of the Weapon Ban Treaty today? I mean, by telling people, hey guys, if you're serious, why don't you catch that low-hanging fruit so that we can move on together towards that disarmament that we all want? Because I tend to be uneasy with that understanding that with something so easy than the CTBT, if people are serious about disarmament, that should be a no-brainer. The CTBT should be in the bag, and then we're moving on to more serious stuff in terms of achieving full disarmament. So that's my problem. It's so easy in the mindset, and that leads me to the other question, which is, shouldn't we have all 8 countries coming together and ratifying? You'll be amazed. When I talk to young student, 15, 14 years old student, what they tell me, they say, but Mr. Zerbo, can't you bring them all in the room and tell them to all sign at the same time? I wish I could do that. That's what I tell them. I wish somebody would help to do that, where we have all the 8 remaining countries sit around the table and then say, hey guys, we're serious about non-proliferation, we're serious about disarmament, and let's ratify it. But I wanted to mention something that happened to me in Japan. I was talking to a group of, 150 young, between 15 and 17 years old, from Russia, US, Japan. And they were asked a question, what is peace to them? The young girl from Russia said peace is trust. And the lady from the US said peace is freedom. And the one from Japan said peace is understanding. So I just want to leave you to reflect on this, to see how domestic politics affects young people in their way of thinking, why they use trust, understanding, and freedom, rather than any other explanation that we can give to peace. And that's why it's so important to talk to young people, right in the beginning, for them to understand the notion that we're trying to develop and what we're trying to achieve for the future. I think that would, did I miss any other question?
Mr. Zerbo, the guy from Kazakhstan, he was talking about the so-called negative assurances for those countries who are supposed to give up nuclear plans, whether it's possible that some kind of guarantees could be provided for those countries who are now in the turmoil of the discussions.
Chairman, I think I'll probably let you answer this question, but if you want me to say something, I understand that diplomacy is about give and take, okay? So people want to give something and then to get something else. And in fact, yes, I was forgetting, you asked me what is the closest nation to consider the CTBT ratification. 2.5 years ago, I said Israel. I said Israel because some of the points that Israel had laid out as conditional to their ratification, I had a feeling that we were dealing with them. The global coverage, the detection capability, not isolating Israel, because we had a workshop in Israel which wasn't easy to achieve. We did that to show that we want them to be part. Sharing data, sharing information, that's something that we've done. And I could not imagine the leadership in Israel organizing a discussion between myself and Prime Minister Netanyahu if they are not serious about the CTBT. And I think they are, and this is the message that I got. They are, and then I felt and I had hope that the ratification could follow. But I think I've learned in diplomacy that things are never that fast, and that it's one step at a time. Then I mentioned also at some point Iran. Iran, because I had a lot of hope on the JCPOA. And that was part of my discussion with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I think if you put yourself in the shoes of the Iranian, if the JCPOA bear fruits, if they see that they've put their hand in something that is now bearing fruit to the society, to the country, it will give them more ground to consider other international treaty. This is what I'm getting from them, and this is a position that we're forced to understand. You've signed a treaty, you've signed an agreement, you want to see that the international community is serious about this agreement, and then you want to move on others. That's the message I'm getting from them. That can I blame them for that? No, because they're telling me that we've done one step, we want to see how this works before we can move to another step. So let's help the JCPOA to be that ground that could help Iran to consider the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty if the JCPOA is considered as important, as solid enough to lay the ground for the trust that Iran needs to consider the CTBT ratification. But I guess whoever comes first, I'll be happy.
Okay.
Thank you.
You want to say something, Gemma?
No, just a couple of words. First of all, I would like to say that it's a big honor for us to host the Pugwash Conference, which has an excellent record in the international community and Nobel Prize movement. Secondly, I would like to say that we started very well, exchanging views on so many acute issues. It's very good. Also, I would like to express our gratitude to the panelists and those who were on the scene, the High Representative of the United Nations on Disarmament, Mr. Lassina, Mr. Danapala, as well as other people, and of course our special tribute to Mr. Zerbo. You need to understand that he leads a very small organization in the system of the United Nations, but at the same time, due to his efforts, this organization has become a very powerful. He succeeded to upgrade and increase the record of the organization because of his intelligence, because of his experience, because of his eloquence. And I think that Mr. Zerbo is a good friend of Kazakhstan. He has been traveling to Kazakhstan prior to having become the head of the CTBTO. And he calls himself, I am a Kara Kazakh. Men Kara Kazakhpan. So he knows well Kazakhstan, he knows our policy, he knows what we are thinking about. So thank you very much, and I believe that this kind of cooperation will have a follow-up. Thanks again.
I think this is concluding our first morning. Be sure that all the topics which have been mentioned here will be discussed during the conference, since we are going to have many, many speakers, discussion and so on, in particular discussion about the Iranian nuclear deal, JCPOA will be dealt with in the last day of the conference with the presence of the Deputy Foreign Minister of Russia, Ryabkov. And since it's been mentioned just now by our distinguished host, at this point, I thank you everybody. You want to say, Jayant, you wanted to add something? No. So I think that we are done. We are a little bit late, just 13 minutes delay, but that's okay. You will be allowed maybe 5 minutes coming back. And we have to keep it. So thank you so much, and all the very best to everybody, and thank you for your contributions.
Thank you, Father. Thank you so much.